Today we're going to be talking about orthographic mapping. Orthographic mapping is a process that happens inside of your brain as you're learning to read and spell new words. These can be regular words or irregular words. We're going to be using a process called Phoneme-Grapheme mapping that helps our students understand how to break up words using the phonetic knowledge that they already know and something called a heart part for those irregular spelled parts. I'm going to be using some manipulatives, maybe a dry erase board and marker, or even a paper and pencil. It's important to remember that this process should be fun for your students. As we go through, if you have any questions or you want me to explain something a little bit further, you can always email me. My email is kschwinn, which is spelled like the bike, SCHWINN, at edisonchargers.org, and I'll be happy to connect with you. Let's go ahead and get started. Orthographic mapping. So you have inside of your brain something called an orthographic lexicon. This is where all of your sight words are stored. Now adults have between 30,000 to 60,000 sight words already mapped in their brain. Of course, students are still working on this orthographic lexicon, so it's much smaller. But as we continue to read, we gain more words in our sight word bank. When I say sight words, you might have a little bit of a preconceived notion. So let's go over what sight words are. You have irregular words that you can use phonics to help you sound out or spell. Words like slip, backpack, and smile. You have your high frequency words, which again uses the phonics and follows all the rules, but you see more frequently in your books. Words like he, she, is, for, or, because, from, words like that. You have your irregular words. Words like friend, read or read, mother. These are words that have irregular parts that phonics might not help with. And then you have your low frequency words. Words like momentous, magical, memorable. So orthographic mapping, what is it? This is how we anchor the words into our sight word memory. We're going to store them for accurate and effortless recognition as we continue on in our academic journey. This is something that we need to focus on. Words known effortlessly. As we look at this graph, you can see that there are grades down at the bottom. The first two show entering kindergarten with 0 words known. Then we have ending kindergarten. You'll also notice that there are two separate lines. The top line is a strong orthographic mapper. These are the students that can tap out sounds and match sounds to letters or letter parts. You also have an orange line, which is your weak orthographic mapper. They don't know how to separate and segment sounds, or they have a hard time connecting sounds to letter or letters. So as you see, our gap is starting to widen at the end of kindergarten. If you have a strong orthographic mapper, they're going to start to get more words mapped into their brain for easy recognition. If you have a student that is a weak orthographic mapper, they're going to have a hard time recognizing those high frequency words or regular words. As we go into ending of first grade, our gap widens even more. If you have a solid knowledge of how to orthographic map your words, you're going to gain knowledge on how to do more and more of those words as you read. But this is where it really gets scary. In second grade, there is a huge difference between those that are a strong orthographic mapper and those that are a weak orthographic mapper. You can see that there's a difference of about 3,000 words here between the ending of second grade. And it just keeps widening as they continue on. So these skills are so important for second and third grade especially. But if you have a student in first grade or even kindergarten that can segment their sounds, they're ready to start to orthographic map using Phoneme-Grapheme mapping. And also in fourth and fifth grade or even higher, you can do this as well. It helps your students to understand how to map the words to their brain. Okay. A couple of things that we need to remember before we start into the actual process. First, We cannot teach orthographic mapping. This is what happens inside of the brain. There's no lesson plan to follow here. This is an overall understanding of how the brain works to read words. Second, we can, though, teach foundational literacy skills to help them orthographic map. So we're going to use something called phoneme-grapheme mapping, which I've mentioned already. This is going to be a process where you're going to help your students map out the sounds to the letter or letters that represent that sound. Third, these skills must practice the connection between phonemes and graphemes, and it builds up automaticity and phonemic processing. We got to keep practicing this to make sure that they are understanding the relationship between the phonemes spoken and the graphemes that represent them. Last, teacher knowledge is crucial. Thank you for taking the time to watch this with me today. As you're going through and you're starting to learn a little bit more about how the brain works with reading words, then reach out to me, reach out to another literacy coach that you know, or go ahead online and start doing some research. There is a ton of research through the science of reading that shows us how the brain truly reads. So let's go ahead and get started with some things that are going to help you in your classroom. Anchoring words in our memory. What can we do? Now, I'm sure you've all seen this before. The old flashcards with the sight words on them. This is what we used to do before we knew better. But now we know better. Memorization is not an effective strategy. Putting a flashcard in front of a student is going to take them between 5 to 500 repetitions of that word before it's put into their orthographic lexicon. That's a lot. If you think of all the words that kids are expected to know by even the end of first grade, do you have time to sit there and do a sight word 500 times? No. Even if you had to do it 100 times, a fifth of the time, it's still impossible. That's why there is a better way to get our students to recognize those high frequency words and even regular words too. Research shows us that few repetitions are needed to permanently map using orthographic mapping. The process of phoneme-grapheme mapping has changed my world as a teacher. Your recollection of the word does not fade. Have you ever given those tests, the high-frequency word test or the sight word test, where you give them a list, they read them perfect one week, and then you come back to that same list the next week, and then all of a sudden they don't seem to know it anymore? That's because memorization doesn't work. If we use the process of orthographic mapping, it's going to be permanently stored, and we don't have to worry about it popping on their head. Now, I wanted to prove to you that this is not just something that I researched and am throwing at you. This is one of my students when I taught second grade. We'll call him Jay. Jay was reading at a kindergarten level in the middle of second grade. Now, mind you, when I was a second grade teacher, I was going through the process of the science of reading and educating myself on how students actually read. It was about mid-year that I discovered the process of phoneme-grapheme mapping. I thought, well, why not try it out? Instead of just researching, let's actually put it into use. So I had Jay come over with me, and we did this process a few times with some kindergarten words. It was amazing. He used to read me lists and guess at all of the different words based on the first sound, make me want to rip my hair out. But as soon as Jay and I started doing the phoneme-grapheme mapping, he finally understood what I was trying to get him to do the whole time. He was mapping his sounds to the graphemes that represent them. He was able to come back weeks later and tell me what the word was without having to go through the whole process again or doing memorizing on the sight word card. He changed from the middle of second grade to the end of second grade, going from the kindergarten level high frequency words all the way through to the beginning of second grade level reading words. I was floored. I couldn't believe that this much difference happened in that short amount of time just by changing my instruction. Jay was now a confident reader, and he could tell me what those words said easily, quickly, and in text. I was amazed. So what skills drive the mapping? What do you need to have as a student before you can start orthographic mapping? Because I'll tell you, if you're not ready, then this is not going to work. So make sure your students have these 3 things before starting the process. First, we have phoneme proficiency. Remember that this is different than phonemic awareness. This is instant automatic accuracy, making sure they know the phoneme sound. Second, automatic phoneme-Grapheme recognition, being able to match your sound to a certain letter spelling. So saying that the sh sound is spelled sh. And then frequent and distributed practice. Make sure that this is occurring with printed words and phonetic skills. So using it as just writing it on the page, which I'm going to show you how to do, and also using it in text. Those are the 3 things that your students need to have before you start the process of phoneme-grapheme mapping. Your students need to be able to segment sounds in the word, and that includes blends, because we all know blends are tricky in words, especially the nasal blends. If your student can't tell you that the 3 sounds in cat are k, a, t, they're not ready for the orthographic mapping. However, if they can tell you like the word farm has 3 sounds, r, then they're ready to start that process. Make sure also that they can match the sound to the letters that spell it. A couple of misconceptions that we need to make sure that we are not pushing on our students. First, words are stored visually. I'm sure, just by looking at this picture right here, that you know that this state is Texas. Words are not that way. I'm sure you've seen where you have those letter boxes. You have the tall letter boxes for like the L's or the F's. You have the medium level boxes for like your A's, your I's, your R's. And then you have the ground level boxes for like your G's or your J's. By doing those, we're saying that we can memorize the words based on their shape. The brain does not read that way. They are not pictures to be memorized, like the state of Texas. Second, words are stored as whole words. This one is tricky because, of course, when we see a word, we can recognize it. But our brain is actually looking at the different phonetic parts. It sees maybe a blend, or it sees a digraph, and it uses that information to quickly recognize that word. As you're reading in your books, you're not reading word by word. You're actually reading a couple of letters at a time. Third, after a certain age, kids cannot learn phonics. This is one of the ones that breaks my heart because phonics can go up all the way through the end of school. Just because you're in 3rd, 4th, or 5th grade doesn't mean that your phonics instruction stopped. It just changes. Right here, I have a little progression of how phonics works. We start with phonology and then go into orthography. So this is your sounds and then matching the sounds to those letters. Then we move into morphology, which is the study of the words, and semantics, which is meaning of words, and so on and so forth until we get to pragmatics, which is understanding how the words are represented. Finally, phonemic awareness ends early, like 1st grade. This is another thing that we need to make sure we are not putting in our heads. Phonemic awareness is something that should be practiced all the way up through middle school. Phonemic awareness can get very difficult, which means that we're using our ears to help manipulate the word. That's going to help us as we're reading some of those weird words that we may not know. Here's an example. If I had the word brought, and I took away the sound, what's my word? And they'd say bought. So it's a little bit more challenging for those higher students. But make sure they have the lower level skills before we start to get into those more difficult skills. Okay, I touched on this a little bit before, but I'm going to tell you one more time just to make sure that we have this in our brain. Sight words do not equal high-frequency words. There is a difference. Your sight words are any word that you can read effortlessly and quickly. High-frequency words are words that occur a lot in text. When we talk about sight words, we usually mean high-frequency words. So if you're catching yourself calling them sight words, take a time out and see, is it the sight word that I'm actually referring to, or are they high-frequency words? Because there's a difference. Sight words are not just to, from, the, and, is, but they can also be these down here. Now, as you're looking at these words down here, I'm sure you don't have to sit there and go, compensate. You look at it immediately, and it's a sight word for you. You can easily go compensate, confiscate, and complicate. You don't have to sit there and try to sound it out. Those are sight words for you. But just because they're sight words for you doesn't mean they're sight words for someone else. All of our sight word banks are different. Your personal list of sight words might be different from the person next to you. Now, your high-frequency words are words that occur most often in text, and these are the lists that come from Dolch, Fry, or some other curriculums as well. Make sure you remember that just because it's a sight word for you might not mean it's a sight word for somebody else. If it's a sight word, you do not need to sound it out or guess based on the first letter. You don't need to look at a picture, and you cannot confuse it with other similar words like there and they and then. As we talked before, in this process we have phoneme-grapheme mapping. Through orthographic mapping, we are permanently mapping our words. We don't have to come back to it lots of times. It usually takes the process between 1 to 4 times for it to be permanently mapped. Way better than 5 to 500 for the memorization. It almost never gets erased from your sight word memory. Once you've mapped it, it's in there permanently. When you look at a permanently mapped word, you cannot not read it. Down there in purple, I'm sure you looked at it already, your brain automatically recognized the word that it says. It says ricochet, scrumptious. It's permanently mapped to my brain and is not going to fall out because I have mapped those words to my orthographic lexicon. They're sight words for me. Remember, as they are permanently mapped, your automaticity is going to take over. I'm sure you've seen this before, where you have the colors, but it's spelled differently. I'm going to try to go through these, and now I've done this twice already, so I might be better at it. But we're going to go through first, reading the words, and then second, reading the colors. Actually, I'm going to give you just a few seconds to do that. First time, read through with just the words. Second time, read through trying to say the color. Go ahead and try it. How'd you do? It was easier to read the word than try to remember what the color was. So you probably went something like this. Blue, green, purple, red, blue, yellow. Green, yellow, red, purple, red, green. On the second try, it's a little bit more difficult because I had to actually think about what color was coming up instead of just pulling that automatic word from my brain. So let's get into phonemes and graphemes, and then we'll start to get into the process a little bit so we can start helping your students. What's the difference between phonemes and graphemes? First, all words are made up of a sequence of speech sounds. These speech sounds are called phonemes. Phonemes, like phone, means sound. Each phoneme is related to a letter or letters that spells that sound. Like CH will spell the sound of ch, or S can spell the sound of s. Each letter or combinations of letters that spell the phoneme is called a grapheme. And I like to remember this because in my pencil you have graphite. So that helps me remember that when I'm writing, those representations are the grapheme of the phoneme. All right, now we're starting to get into some of the stuff that can help your students. So we're going to do the word chip. First thing we're going to do is repeat the word chip, and then we're going to see how many sounds it has. I have ch, I, p, 3 sounds. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have 3 markers that show those sounds. Now I'm going to use some fun things here. So maybe I'd like to use a puppet. I could go ch, I, p, and show that it's 3 sounds. Or I could use my bingo chips and go ch, I, p, with 3 sounds. It's kind of hard without a table. I'm trying to hold them up for you. Or we could do some cubes and I could go ch, I, p. Or you could do toy cars and do ch, I, p. Or you could do a magnetic wand with some magnetic chips. Ch, I, p. Just anything to make it fun and interactive for your students. We want that multi-sensory sort of thing. I don't know how to say that. Multi-sensory, you know what I mean. Anyways, so you want to use a whole bunch of different things to help your students stay engaged and to use their hands in different ways than just writing. Okay, so we have the word chip. We know that there are 3 sounds in the word chip. There are 3 phonemes, which is your sound, but there are also 3 graphemes. So you have your grapheme of CH for the ch sound. You have your grapheme of I for the I sound. And you have your grapheme of P for the P sound. 3 phonemes, 3 graphemes. They're always going to match. Like I said earlier, we talked about segmentation and how it's crucial to orthographic mapping. If your students cannot segment those words, so like if you do Haggerty and you see that they cannot segment those sounds, they're not ready to do this process yet. Make sure your students can do this with automaticity and fluency before you start this process. Because if you start this process too early and they can't separate those sounds, it's not going to go well. I'll leave you with a quote here from David Kilpatrick, one of the leading people in phoneme-grapheme mapping. Go ahead and read it. All right, so let's jump in a little bit here. Things you need to know. All right, tips and tricks. Vocabulary. Your vocabulary is so important as you are working with these students. You want to make sure that you are using the same words as you are trying to work with that student. So things like digraph to represent the 2 letters that make one sound. Use the actual vocabulary. Call it a digraph. Things like phoneme, which is the sound, vowel, blends. Make sure we're using that vocabulary so they're knowing what they should be doing. Also, make sure you're doing, how do I spell that sound, rather than what letter spells that sound. How do I spell that sound instead of what letter is that? So like, let's say, in the word play, I have a long A sound. Instead of saying what letter says A, I could say, how do I spell the sound of A? Because it could be AI, it could be AY, it could just be A consonant E, could be just, there's all sorts of them. So make sure you do, how do I spell that sound? Okay, as we're going through, I'm sure you already know these, but let's just touch on them real quick to make sure we're on the same page. Blends. Blends are 2 or more separate boxes. 2-letter blends have 2 separate sounds. 3-letter blends have 3 separate sounds. Each of your sounds are going to get a specific box. And actually, let me back up a little bit here because you're probably telling me, what boxes? What are we talking about? So as you're doing your phoneme-grapheme mapping, you're going to be using, here it is, you're going to be using some Alconin boxes like this. Or you can use something like this, sound boxes. Or if you're going with a little bit older students, you can have this, and I'll show you how to use that as well. So inside of these boxes, we're going to be putting letters to represent the sounds. Each box is going to get 1 sound. That's why I said for blends like bull in blend, I would put BL in 2 separate boxes. And we'll practice that a little bit later. Okay, digraphs. Digraphs like SH, CH, TH, NG, WH, these are going to go in 1 box because both letters make 1 sound. I always have my kids cross their fingers for a digraph. So like CH, the letters C and H will go in one box because they make one sound together. Silent E. If you have a word that has a silent E, this is going to go in the final box. So I'm going to write it actually a little bit smaller and next to the letter at the end because it doesn't get a sound box. It does not make a sound. So I'm going to add it into the last box. And again, we'll practice this in a little bit so you know what I'm talking about. Also, when you have a silent E, make sure you have an arrow pointing back to the vowel that it controls. That's going to help your students know why there's an E on the end of the word. For your ings, your angs, things like this, the vowel is going to go in a separate box. Remember, NG is a digraph. It has one sound. So your I in ing is going to go in one box, while your NG is going to go in a second. So make sure you're splitting those up. Same thing for ang. So you'd have A in one box and NG in a second. Now, like in ank, A-N-K, this would be different because NK is actually a blend and not a digraph. So that would be in three separate boxes, A and K. For your X actually makes two sounds. It says K. So anytime you have an X in your word, like the word fox, first I would tap it out. I would go ah, and it's two sounds. So I would find the one that has four sounds right here, and I would go ah, but then I'd stop and I'd say, what letter says real quick? And they would tell me X. What we're going to do right here in these two boxes is I'm going to make an X, but I'm going to put it over top of the line there so that it's in both boxes. So that's what you do for letter X. Also, if you have the QU sound, which is not a digraph because it makes, it's not a digraph because it makes two sounds. So what we do for that is we put it in two separate boxes. But when you have the QU sound, I'm going to put the Q close to the right side, and I'm going to put the U close to the left side. So they're very close together because they're always together. Okay, let's see what's next. Okay, actually, let's pause here, and I'm going to have you grab a piece of paper or a whiteboard, and we're going to practice some words together before we start to talk about irregular words. So if you'd like to grab one of these, just like Elkanon boxes, you could do that. You can just grab a regular whiteboard or piece of paper, and I'll show you how to do that. So we'll do first the Elkanon boxes so you understand how to do that with your students, and then I'll move on to the whiteboard. Okay, excuse me. So the first word that we're going to do together is the word list. So I'd have my students tell me back, list. They would repeat it, list. And I'd say, how many sounds or phonemes are in the word list? And we would tap it out together. We'd go, o, I, and they would say 4. Now, remember, we want to keep this fun and engaging. So if you would like to grab your Pop-It, you can. If you'd like to grab your bingo chips, you can do that. You can do cubes like this, anything to get things engaging for the students. I love to use the Pop-Its, and so do my students. So we would go, we would go, o, I. I'd say, how many did you just pop? And they would tell me there are 4 phonemes in this word. So then we would find which box has 4 phoneme boxes, which is right here. And I'd say, great, now let's go ahead and map the word list. Now, I'm going to go through a process here, and I'm going to start with my beginning sound. And I would say, list, list. What is my beginning sound in list? And they tell me the sound is O. Remember, they're not telling me the letter yet. Be very specific when you do this. You want to ask the sound first. Say, what sound comes first? And they say, O. I say, great. How do you spell O? And they would then tell me L. So right here in this first box, we're going to write an L to represent the O sound. Okay? Now in this word, since there's a blend at the end, I'm just going to go in order of list. So I would say, great, we have the O sound. What comes next? O, I. And And this is where that chopping comes into play. We're segmenting the word. So we have ol, we have I. I go right. The next sound is I. It's a vowel sound, a short vowel. How do I spell the I sound? And they would tell me I. So in the second box, we would write an I. Then I'd have them chop it again. I go, oh, I. And I'd stop right there and I'd say, what sound is next? They would tell me, very good, the S. Or I wouldn't say it. I would say S is correct. How do you spell? And they would tell me an S. Great, let's put it in the box. There we have it so far. And then my last one is, what's the last sound in the word? And we could even do the poll where I go, list. What's my last sound you hear? And they would say, t. Go, yes, the last sound is t. How do I spell that sound? And they would say T. We'd write it down, and then bingo bango, there is my word list. So you just orthographic max that with me. Well, we use Phoneme-Grapheme mapping. And that's all it is. So we're going to practice a few more so you get a little bit more comfortable with it. Let's go ahead and do the word that. Okay, now I'm not going to pretend you're my student anymore. We'll just do it as adults. So you can use your sound boxes here. You can use a paper and do it this way. Or I'm going to do it one of those ways, and then the next word we'll do it on the dry erase board. So my word is that. How many sounds in that? I would go at. 3 sounds, so we're going to throw under 3 boxes right here. And we'd start with the beginning sound, which is and that is a digraph. What digraph says? Which is TH. We would put both letters inside of the first box, like that. Then we move on to the middle sound, which is A, spelled A. And then the final sound, which is T, spelled T. And you know what I'm realizing here? I'm super small in the corner. There we go. Now you can see me a little bit better. Okay, so we have TH because it's a digraph that says one sound, then an A, then a T to spell that. Okay, now let's talk about a word with a silent E. Okay, so let's do the word cube. All right, so we have cube. I have 3 sounds again. So I'm going to find my 3 boxes. I'm going to start with my beginning sound, which is k. How do you spell k? And they would either tell me C or K. Now, if they told me K, I would reassure them that yes, the K can say k. But in this word, we're going to use a C. And that's just something that you can tell the students, which is fine. So we have C in the first one. Then I go next, U. I say, ooh, this is a long vowel. What letter spells U? Or I could say what letter combination. It depends on how you teach phonics. So for U, I would put the long U like this. Now, if you teach that it's a vowel consonant E, then you can put that right here. So what I would do is I would just put vowel, which is my U, consonant line like that. And then remember my E, my silent E, is small and goes in that last box. If you remember, this E does not say a sound. So we have to put it with another box because it doesn't get its own. Then the final thing, if you remember, I have to draw a line, an arrow back to the vowel controls. So depending on how you teach phonics, that is how you're going to do the E rollout. Now, we have one more thing to go. We're missing that last final sound. So we would go cube. My last sound is B. I spell it with a B. And there is how you do a magic E word. All right. Okay, we did a blend. We did a digraph. We did a magic E. Oh, let's do the separation of ing. So if I have the word ring, then I would map out the sounds, or tap out the sounds first. So I go It's really tough because NG is a tough sound. So Then we say that has 3 sounds. So we find our 3 boxes here. We do first. Then we have our next sound is short I. And then my final sound is that digraph, which is NG. And since it says one sound, remember it goes in one box. Okay, I'm trying to think if there's anything else Let me look here real quick. Oh, we did the X already, and I showed you how to do the QU. Okay, so perfect. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this aside. This is just something that I like to put in these plastic sleeves here so that I can use dry erase markers with my students, and we can just use the same paper over and over again. If you'd rather do it like actual paper, especially for your students that are a little bit older, then you can use this kind. And what I do here, let me pop this in here real quick. What I do for this paper is I would actually outline how many boxes I'm going to be using. So let's say that I'm doing the word, what do I want to do? Let's do the word for, okay, like I'm going for water. I would do the sounds or, which is 2. On this page, I would outline 2 boxes. Kind of like if you're doing area or perimeter in math, you outline those boxes. Okay, so we have 2, and then inside of those boxes, I would do my spelling. So I have F, and then or, which is 1 sound, like so. Okay, so it just depends on what you're using to help your students. And again, make sure you're using manipulative. I'm pointing to them, but you can't see them. Manipulative to make sure it is fun and engaging for your students. Okay. Let's go ahead on to the trickier part, which is the irregular words. So good news, only about 4% of our English language is truly irregular. For those irregular parts, we're going to do something called a heart part. And this is the part that we have to know by heart. So it's like that little part that we have to memorize inside the word and remember that, oh, I got to use that spelling for this word. I also like to say, make the tricky sticky, and then we draw a heart above it to make it stick inside of our brain. You can also use hearts for phonics rules that you have not introduced yet. This is big in first grade or even kindergarten because a lot of phonics rules have not been introduced to the students yet. So if there is a phonics rule like AY in the word play, and you haven't taught the AY yet, then you would put a temporary heart above it until they have learned it. Now, once they have learned and have been exposed to that phonics rule, then you no longer put a heart above it. Okay, we've kind of already been through this, like what's the routine of how to do this. I'm just going to read this through one more time, and then we're going to practice a whole bunch more. Okay, so first you say the word and have the child repeat the word back to you. You're never going to show them the word beforehand because if you show them, they're going to try to memorize it and then it just defeats the whole purpose. So say the word first and then have the student respond back to you. Second, you're going to ask the child to count the syllables, count the sounds, not syllables. Counting the sounds by tapping or holding up, using your poppet, using your cubes, using your bingo chips, anything to help them count the sounds or the phoneme. Then you're going to outline the correct number of Alconin boxes, just like we did here, or you're going to draw lines on your dry erase board, which I will show you next. Then you're going to go through the routine of spelling each sound. And you can go from the beginning of the word to the end of the word. You can jump around in the word if you'd like to. Like say you want to do the first sound and the last sound and then come to the middle. You can do that if you'd like to. Then you're going to talk about any irregular spellings or heart parts in there. So you're going to do all of the sounds they know first. They know how to spell first. And then we'll go back to the irregular parts and fill them in. And then you're going to add in those with your heart parts. And again, we're going to practice this more so you can get a little bit more comfortable with it. Let's practice. Okay, so this time I'm going to use my dry erase board, and I won't remember to make myself big. There we go. So I'm going to have my dry erase board now because as I teach, I'm not going to have this little thing up in front of my class, that side, because they're not going to be able to see it. So I'm going to blow it up a little bit and put it on my whiteboard or my interactive board. You could even have Alconin boxes on your interactive board. Really, it's what's best for you and your students. So I'm going to show you how to do it with your whiteboard. So let's do the word play. That was on my list to do. Okay, so let's do the word play. We're going to first say the word play. They're going to repeat it, play, and we're going to tap it out or segment it to see how many sounds I have. So I would go ahead and I don't have any magnets here. Okay, let's pretend that these are magnets. So I'd go p. I balance it, kind of. O, A. Okay, so we have 3 sounds. Now what I'm going to do with my marker is I'm going to either draw lines or you can draw boxes. It's up to you. So I'm going to go O, A. Okay? Now I can turn those into boxes if I wanted to. Box, box, box. It doesn't matter. It's up to you. All right? Then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to find my marker. And I'm going to fill in the sounds I know. So I have p, p, p. That's spelled with a P. O is spelled with an L. And then I have the sound of A. Now, if you've already taught AY as the long A sound, then you can just put AY here. However, if you have not taught the sound of AY, you would ask, what is my last sound? They would say A. Say, yes, that is my last sound. How do I spell A? And they could give you some various answers. An A consonant, E, etc. However, they're probably not going to give you the right one because they don't know it yet. And you would reassure them, yes, you are giving me the correct spelling for A sound. But in this word, we're going to use some letters together. This word is going to use A and Y together to make the A sound. So see how I put that there? And then, since they have not learned this yet, I'm going to say this is a heart part. We need to remember this part by heart because we didn't learn yet that AY says A. So I need to remember when I'm writing the word play, I'm going to use that AY for the A sound. That's my heart part. And again, you would have them participating with you. They're not just watching, they're doing it with you. And they are drawing the heart part and they are listening to why that's a heart part. Then you could do this a couple more times the same day or a different day coming back to it. Hold on, I need some muscle here. Okay, and you could use the dry erase markers again, or you can change it up. And let's say we're going to come back to this word tomorrow. Okay, it's the next day. We're going to do the word play again. Let's say, what's the word play? They repeat it, play. Very good. This time we're going to use boxes. So we're going to go P, O, A, because we already know that there are 3 sounds. Okay, we have 3 boxes for 3 sounds. And I'd say, okay, now this time we're going to grab our magnetic letters and we're going to use it to do our phoneme-grapheme mapping today. So I'm going to say, what is my first sound? They tell me P. Yes, how do I spell that? With a P. So they grab their P and put it in the first box. Then we go to the next sound. O. Okay, how do I spell O? With an L. Very good. And then I go, what's that last sound? They say A. I said, oh, I remember from yesterday that play has a heart part in it because we haven't learned this team yet. I say, what team of letters says that A sound? And they would say, oh, I remember because it's the heart part. A and Y. And remember, they're putting it in the same box because it says one sound. And there we have the word play. And remember, this process does take 1 to 4 times. It's dependent on the child. So some kiddo might get it after the first time, and some kiddo might need to repeat it a few times to make sure that they know how to do it. All right, let's practice a couple more here. Let's do another heart part, and this is an actual heart part. It's a true irregular word, so all students are going to have a heart part on this one. This is the word said, okay? Said has 3 sounds. So we, of course, would do our fun little sound popping or bingo markers or anything like that. Up to you, okay? Then I'm going to either do Elkanon boxes or I can write it here. And again, the students are participating with me. So we would go, okay, it has 3 sounds. We said D. Excellent. Okay, now what is the first sound I hear in said? And they would say, yes. How do I spell that? With an S. Wonderful. They'd write an S there. I'd say, okay, now we're going to jump to the end of the word. What is the sound you hear at the end of said? They go, said. D is the last sound. I say, yes. How do I spell that sound? They'd say D. Good. Now I come to the middle and I say, how do I spell that middle sound? What is that middle sound? They go, d, short E. Oh, you're right. So I would spell it with an E, right? They say, yes. Not in this word. In this word, we have a heart part. I'm actually going to use a team of letters to do the short E sound. This one is used with a I, and again, it's on one line, one box, because it says one sound. And this is when I say, that's a heart part, that's a tricky. So we got to make it sticky. So we're going to grab our marker and we're going to put a heart above it, because that's just one we need to know by heart for the word said. And then again, remember it does take 1 to 4 times of the phoneme-grapheme mapping in order for it to be mapped permanently in our brain. So you might need to do this process a few times. And then that's the word said. All right, let's try the word. Let's do the word they. Okay, we're going to try it, the word they. I'm going to give you just a few seconds. You can go ahead and do it on your board, and then we're going to check it together, and we'll see if you got the word they correct. I'm going to do it with my Elconin boxes. Go ahead and try they. If you are not finished and you need some more time, go ahead and pause here so I don't accidentally give you the answer. Okay, here is the word they. It has 2 sounds, v, a, and my EY is a heart part, so I'd put a heart above it because that's irregular. So we have 2 sounds, PH in one because it makes 1 sound, and EY in the other with a heart above it. All right, let's try another one. Let's do the word great. Great. All right, if you're not done with the word great, then go ahead and pause here. Here's the word great. It's in 4 sounds. We have g, ate, and that A sound is spelled EA, so that's going to be a heart part because that is irregular. All right, let's try another one. That red does not want to erase. Okay, let's do an easy one. Let's do the word barn. Barn. And I'm going to use this side this time. So if you have older students and you want to see how they're used with that one, I will show you. The word again is barn. All right, if you are not ready, go ahead and pause the video. Here is the answer. I have the word barn. There are 3 sounds. The AR says 1 sound, so it gets 1 box. B-R. Okay. Doing good? All right, let's do a long word. Let's do the word. What do I want to do? Let's do the word unicorn. Go ahead and do the word unicorn. That was a longer one, so if you need some more time, go ahead and pause here. Here is my word unicorn. It has 6 sounds. I have U, N, I, K, or And nothing about that word is irregular, so I need no heart parts there because the U can be spelled with just a U for the long sound. So, unicorn. So that just proves that this process can be done with literally any word in the English language. It does not have to be a high frequency word. It does not have to be an irregular word. It can be any word you can think of. Okay, let's try the word should, and I'll go back to my Elconin boxes here. Should. All right, let's go ahead. If you need more time, pause. Here's the word should. We have a digraph that has one sound. I have O-U-L for the sound, which is a heart part because that is irregular. And then D for my final sound for should. Let's do the word fishbowl. I saw it over there. Fishbowl. I'm actually going to do this one on my board. Okay, go ahead and pause if you need to. Here is the word fishbowl. I have 6 sounds. Digraph here. B-O-W. And the O-W says the O sound. Now, if this has not been taught yet, I would put a temporary heart part above that. But if you know that O-W says O, then you can just spell it in there. All right. I'm trying to think if there's. Let's do water. Water. Right? Pause if you need to. Here's the word water. Water has one irregular part. That A says the ah sound. Water. All right. Let's do another silent E word. Let's do the word mice. Mice. Okay, pause if you need to. Here is the word mice. I have I, and remember it has a long I sound. So in this word, the E is controlling it at the end. So I wrote my E small, and I drew a line back to the I to show which vowel is controlling mice. Okay. Let's do queen. Queen. All right, pause if you need to. Here's the word queen. I have that QU again, which has 2 boxes. It does have 2 sounds, and I put them close together. Then I have my vowel team of EE and my final sound of N. If you've not taught EE as a spelling for E, then this would have a heart part above it temporarily until they learn it. All right. I think that will be enough practice for now. If you need more practice, then just let me know and I can give you some more words. We can also communicate together if you need some more help. That is all that wraps it up for me. So thank you so much for being attentive and participating with me and learning a new process as we are figuring out how the brain truly does read. Again, here is my email if you need it, kschwinn@edisonchargers.com. Now, this is from a thing that I said that I would come in and model because I'm a literacy coach here at my school. So if you want to like videotape yourself, I'm happy to do that if you're like from a different school district or whatever. But you can send me a video and I'm happy to show you that, or I can model through a video and send it to you. So yeah, if you have any questions or need anything, please do not hesitate to contact me and I'll be happy to help you out. Thanks so much for attending today, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.